Welcome to the Company of Dads podcast, where we explore the sweet, silly, strange, and sublime aspects of being a lead dad in a world where men, who are the go-to parent, aren't always accepted at work, among their friends, or in the community for what they're doing. I'm your host, Paul Sullivan. Our podcast is just one of the many things we produce each week at the Company of Dads. We have various features, including Lead Dad of the Week. We have our monthly meetups, and we have a resource library for all fathers. The one-stop shop for all of this is our newsletter, The Dad. So sign up today at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Today, our guest is Michael Ray, a LinkedIn top voice on gender equity and a solo dad to his 12-year-old daughter, Charlie. I've been following Michael for the better part of 2 years, and I am just a fan. I'm a super fan of what he writes about, how he thinks about fatherhood and gender, and I'm really grateful he's here. You know, for those of you, I follow him on LinkedIn, Michael Ray. Get there, follow him right away. He's also the author of 2 books. One, Who Knew? From Bouncing and Barbells to Ballet and Braids, and a children's book called A Step in the Right Direction. And all of this began when his daughter was 4 and he wanted to get her ready for her ballet recital. We'll talk about that later in the show. But first off, Michael, welcome to the Company of Dads podcast.
G'day, Paul. Thanks so much for the opportunity, mate. And let me just tell you and the viewers, I come from the future in Australia. It's tomorrow there in America, and it's all okay. Tomorrow's okay.
Tomorrow's okay. Because I'm still trying to get through yesterday, Michael. So that's what we're doing here. You know, this is, you know, the toughest part when you find somebody in Australia that you want to connect with. It's like, oh God, this is the worst time zone difference you could possibly have from the East Coast. And you're in the West. You're in Melbourne. You're in the West Coast of Australia. I'm outside
East Coast, Paul.
Melbourne. That's what I meant to say. Because I'm an American, and so we have great skills when it comes to geography, Michael. On the East Coast, and so here I am on the East Coast of America. Big time difference. But we made it work, Michael, and that's a step in the right direction, right?
Oh, that'd be a good name for a book, Paul.
All right. You know, from following you, from reading a lot of what you've written, you're the type of guy where there's a big before and after story here. And if anybody missed it, the subtitle of that book, From Bouncing and Barbells to Ballet and Braids, that really sets up a dichotomy. So what was that before and after? You know, who was Michael before the age of 49 when he became a dad?
Paul, I grew up in a typical heteronormative home. Mum ran the home. Dad did all of the work. Mum didn't even have a license until Dad had a stroke later in life, because Dad would do everything and support Mum. They had a fantastic marriage that lasted all of their lives. They raised 3 kids. 2 of them turned out okay, and then there was me. In my early days, I was a bodyguard for every rock star that came through Melbourne, everyone from Bon Jovi through to Whitney Houston, Bruce Springsteen, Guns N' Roses. So getting to travel right through Asia and Australia with these guys, a lot of bravado and machismo type thing, standing between.
But what about those guys? Like, you know, in America, we love the Australian bands. What about like INXS and Men at Work? Did you ever do anything for those guys?
All of those. I can actually tell you an early story of INXS. They come down from Sydney. They were playing under a pseudonym of Spiders from Mars, and they were sleeping on a couch and the lounge room floor at my boss's house. That's how early in their days they were, because they wanted to see if they could break into the Melbourne market, which was pretty big back then.
Yeah.
So all of those guys stayed at people's houses while they were on tour, looking after their wives, just constantly in that. Went on to become an elite level strength and conditioning coach. Lived in America for a while, coaching some tennis players, boxers. So pretty, real macho, hyper masculine world. And then suddenly at 49, after a short-term relationship, became a dad. And gee, what a shock that was.
Talk about it. What was the shocking part? You know, I guess at 49 you didn't think you'd be a dad, then you become a dad. Talk about, you know, the process. Like you said, a very hyper, you know, masculine world. You have one daughter, Charlie, and so you're going to be a girl dad. You know, was there an adjustment period for you from being not a dad to becoming a dad?
Paul, it was great. I had honestly thought fatherhood had passed me by, and the odds were always against me with my looks and personality of ever getting the opportunity to become a dad. But it happened, and I'd always had a connection with kids in my role as a strength and conditioning coach. A lot of kids, they gravitated to me. I was a swim teacher for many years. So I absolutely love kids, but it was just something where I thought, if it happens, it happens. Um, I didn't have problems or any concerns about being a dad. I had more concerns about being in a relationship than that. And to bear that out, the relationship ended about 9 months after Charlie was born. So I became a single dad at 9 months old, and then a sole parent when Charlie was about 16 months old, with a mum playing no further part in her life.
And has that continued? Is her mom still out of her life, and you're the sole parent?
Yeah, mum's out of her life, but believe it or not, I managed to find somebody. I got married in February 1 year ago to the most amazing woman. But for the first 5 and a bit years, I made a point of staying single because I couldn't risk people coming in and out of Charlie's lives. And I'd come from a place of scarcity as a dad. So when we separated, getting access to my daughter was being challenged. And 2 weeks after we separated, after a small car accident, they took me in just to scan my neck, and they found out that I had some lumps and bumps that weren't meant to be there, and my future wasn't guaranteed. So suddenly, that mindset of, will my daughter even remember me? Will I be able to do anything with her of any impact all at once, having my access restricted? And I think I still live with that now. That's why I say in the book, it's the gift of clarity that often only comes through crisis. At that point,
Yeah.
my life had become like a house that I built and furnished and filled with everything and all of those experiences. And when I heard the doctor speaking to me, the only thing of consequence, the only thing I could focus on was what impact it was going to have on my daughter and my loved ones. So that house had become, there were flames leaping through the roof and smoke billowing out the windows, and I was forced to consider, what was I prepared to run into that house? And everything else in life just melted away, and the only thing was my daughter. And that's sort of continued, Paul. It was a blessing in disguise. It's just really made me appreciate the fragility of um, today, and the benefits and the need to enjoy and embrace it.
Yeah. You know, first time fatherhood is a shock for any man. No matter, any books you read, any stories you hear from your buddies, anything you witness when you go to someone's house. But first time fatherhood for you sounds exponentially more complicated. Your relationship was on shaky ground. You had health concerns. You had access to your daughter being restricted. I'm going to guess it probably changed some of your thinking around what you were doing for a living. How did you? And but that's not super uncommon. We know that in the United States, 18% of all fathers are divorced, widowed, or otherwise single. So when you were trying to, sort through that and make it through to the other end, which obviously you had, what were the things that you thought of? What kept you going? How did you sort of tick away at things, to get to, a year or two out from that moment of crisis?
Paul, I'm fairly pragmatic after the strength and conditioning and the coaching. It's control the controllables. Don't worry about what's outside of your control. So the thing that helped me get through, and if ever I give advice to dads, it's make the moments count. The quantity of time with your child is never guaranteed, because as we say, we don't know, illness, accident, like anything can do that. But the quality of our time is always within our control. So you can make those moments between the moments count. And that's what I focused on. Initially it was the standard every other weekend. And then when the illness popped up and the diagnosis worsened, the court actually hastened to 50-50, because um, still makes me well up when I remember the judge saying, because they argued that, well, there's no use my daughter getting attached to me because I may not be there in the future. And the judge actually stopped it and said, look, this child deserves to form fond, firm, and lasting memories to carry with her through life going forward. And so we're going to expedite this. And so at 9 months old, a little bit later, sorry, 10 months old, I was given 50-50 custody, which is just unheard of. Even my lawyers couldn't believe that we got it. The judge was a great man, and it basically revolved around my treatment because there was radiation involved. You can't be around an infant for 3 days. So he actually worked with the hospital to get my treatment regime and organise access. So I thought, this is great. I've been given the best gift of all times, regardless. So I'm just going to maximise that. And I don't think that's ever gone away, Paul, where it was just grateful. And there are so many dads in the groups, especially, I imagine it's the same for you that we speak with, where dads are just desperate for more time, whether it's through separation or work pressures, or, the one thing that I hear repeatedly is, I wish I had more time with my kids. Well, I've been given that, so I wasn't going to waste it.
The story you tell it, and you think, oh yeah, it was really tough. It must have been really tough for you back in the 1950s. But of course, it wasn't the 1950s. We're talking 2013, 2014, where you were fighting for 50-50, access to your daughter. That is not an absurd thing to ask for. When you, think of like what the, intervening, 10 years have been like, do you see any progress happening in Australia around, equal access to children when parents get divorced? I mean, you're obviously a great model for this, but are you seeing that the country's making some progress to treat both, moms and dads, equally, and not just to assume that mom does X and dad does Y?
Well, Paul, the stats here in Australia show that 1 in 5 single parent households are currently led by fathers. So that's 20%. But single father households are now the fastest growing family demographic in Australia, estimated to increase 40 to 65%. But we still don't have change tables in males' faces. We still have in Victoria here, the first point of contact and the ongoing support hub for new parents is still the maternal and child health centre. So we haven't caught up with the fact that a lot of support services and things like that haven't been provided to these dads. Now, whether it's the court facilitating the fastest growing family demographic being single fathers, or whether it's the fact that mothers are struggling at a rate where it's deemed that dad doesn't. But the interesting thing that I'd say, Paul, is there's a perception that the family courts are biased against mum because of the outcomes. But it's like sausage making. If you look at what goes into the sausage, you can't be disappointed with what comes out. So my suggestion to dads is, don't be disappointed that the family court didn't provide you with the opportunity to do what you had the opportunity to do before the separation. So before you separate is the time to organise your flexible work schedules. Before the time is to say to your wife, I want to be equally responsible. I want to co-parent. I want to be accepted, have my influences and my story be able to influence the way I parent and not be a clone of you. Because when you turn up at court and say, right, who was doing all the childcare, school drop-off? Well, mum was, but I was working. Well, of course the court's going to go, well, why would that change? It's best for the kids. Right. But if you turn up and go, I was 50% responsible, or I was the lead dad, or I was doing it all, the court isn't going to turn that on its head. So it's not the court that did it. It was you missed the opportunity to get things in place. Because I often say to dads, you travel 3 weeks out of the month and you want 50-50. Right. So like, how are you going to
the math doesn't work? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, I'm going to change my jobs. But so you'll be unemployed for why you haven't got this. Focus on what you can do. Support mum, because the quality of our children's outcomes isn't determined on the number, the gender, even the cohabitation of the parents. It's on the quality of the relationship within that family, everyone in it. So if fighting for that 50-50 and getting, throwing the rules out and not being that supportive, it's just going to impact your child. So like it or not, you miss the boat.
By the time your daughter was 2, you were a solo dad. You had full custody of her. That's pretty quick, to go from fighting to have access to her, to thinking you might die, to then being this solo dad. How did you adjust to that? And, what are some lessons that perhaps you took away from that pretty quick ascent into being a solo dad?
Well, it again came back to that pragmatic coaching thing. Like, I don't have the skills to do this yet. It's
Yeah.
Let's strip it away. It's not that complicated. It's either one end or the other when they're young. So they're either hungry or they need to be changed. One of the hardest things was the unsolicited parenting advice, and it would come from everywhere. And some of the most patronizing, just ridiculous advice that, and you will get it everywhere you go, because the assumption was you were more Homer Simpson than Bluey, and this child was at risk in your care. But the same with the compliments. And,
Oh yeah,
it's,
over compliments. You're like, oh
oh,
my goodness, look, he did bought her lunch. Look at that
yeah,
guy. Like he's
yeah, that's
feeding
what I
her.
say. I didn't cure cancer. I did a French braid. And the only reason I did a French braid is because I went and had lessons to do it, because I thought, here's a skill that I need to have just in case, and I'll go to somebody to teach me to do it. So we used to go Saturday afternoons. There was a hairdressing place, and they used to, when they close up, in we go, and they teach me all these new hair things, and it was great. When we'd walk out, it'd be like, oh, hasn't mummy done your hair beautifully? And she'd say, no, it was daddy. And then it was like, really? And it's why I say, well, the hairdresser that just taught us how to do it, he was a bloke or a man as well. So, they have male hairdressers.
Yeah.
So, and that's what I said. I didn't cure cancer. I'm just parenting.
Yeah. But there was, when I read your backstory, there was sort of a seminal moment in parenting when your daughter has a ballet recital and, you want to help her get ready, but there's an obstacle in your way. Could you please, share that story and how you eventually got around that obstacle?
Well, being a dad, say to my daughter and wanting to get her to socialize with as many kids as we can, because being a dad, it's a lot different to being a mum, because all of my friends, all of my mates were off working, and their wives were not gatekeepers, but they were the ones with the kids. So, and so off we went to ballet. 3-year-old ballet was great, and she liked jumping around with the little mates. And we had the 3-year-old ballet concert. That was fine. Then at the 4-year-old ballet concert, we get all the information, and it's mothers are expected to be present for the full 3-hour dress rehearsal. Mothers need to ensure that the ballet bun is done in this fashion. Mothers need to ensure that the lipstick is this shade. There's a special Mummy and Me ticket offer, and right at the bottom it's got, and there are no males allowed in the backstage area. So I'm thinking it's just
But all
standard.
the first things on that list, you used to travel with rock stars. You knew about hair, you knew about makeup, you knew about all, So you had that covered probably better than those moms. I mean, look at Jon Bon Jovi's hair back in the day. Come on.
Yeah. Well, Paul, I'm used to these things. 160 of the most popular children's books, when they did a survey on them, dads were seen as less involved, less engaged. So I'd be reading to Charlie. I'm no Doctor Who, so trying to find something that rhymes with mother in the middle of it, and trying to find ones with dads was virtually impossible. So I just thought it's just a standard pro rata form. They mean parents. They just put dad. So when we get to the concert information center, I put my hand up and I said, well, I have to be backstage because it's just Charlie and I. I got asked the same question. I've been asked a million times by employers and everyone through the years, Paul, does she have a nan or an auntie? I said, well, she's got both of those, but I'm a parent. I'm her only parent. I'm 100% responsible for her. I'm about 60% capable on a good day, but it's me or it's no one. And they're actual responsible. Well, sorry, Michael, it's got to be no one. It's like, no, you don't seem to understand. I can't accept my daughter being backstage sharing with all the other students her nerves, her excitement, her, just can't wait to get out into the high performance world of 4-year-old ballet concerts and look around the room and go, with a parent, with a parent, with a parent, and here I am on my own. I said, surely you can understand that's not acceptable, and it's actually a little bit heartbreaking. Paul, at that stage, we were just going through our marriage equality debate here in Australia. So we were up to our rainbow socks in the realization that families come in all different, um, you know, configurations. Yeah. So one day there was going to be 2 dads and 2 mums, or however else it was going to be. So they said, sorry, Michael, it's child protection. I said, well, I've actually got what's called my working with children license here after being a swim teacher and sports coach. So I'm trusted with other people's children. So they said, oh, it's about the little girls being uncomfortable with a man backstage. And I said, Paul, there are 2 boys here in the class. Did you ask if they're uncomfortable with all the women? So they said, well, we'll have to have a meeting. Luckily, my mum tribe backed me up because I was doing a lot of the other girls' ballet buns before class. And they said, well, if Michael's not allowed backstage, we're not allowed. So it's all of us or none of us.
Wow.
Luckily, one of the mums knew a journalist. And when we walked out of the car, Charlie was a little bit upset, saying, Dad, can't you be there? And I said, no, Bub, I'll be there. I won't let you down. It's us. And she's gone, but I really want to do the concert. And I said, well, it's us, Bub. We're there. Lady came up, knocked on my window. I was about to drive. She said, look, I know a journalist. This is wrong. Journalist rang me up to cut the story a bit short, Paul. Suddenly it's national news. It's ridiculous. It's on the main bulletins. We had a big full page, second page of one of our largest newspapers nationally. I'm getting called up by radio stations. Oh, this is outrage. It was fair to say when I went back for that meeting with the ballet school, they had a rethink and the ballet ban was overturned. But, it's just ridiculous, Paul. And that's why I said, look, I didn't create the problem. If you put on an event and there's no wheelchair access and there's somebody with a wheelchair, you make sure that there's a ramp, that there's access. So we do all that. But if you're going to put on an event and go, well, there's no facilities for men, so we can't have men. Well, no, you've got to provide the facilities because, whatever happened to diversity and inclusion?
Yeah. And obviously that's an amazing victory for you and Charlie, but I'm going to guess, is that really what set your career in a different direction and started, getting you to think more about being an advocate for fathers and gender equality more broadly?
Yeah, 100%, Paul. That's what kicked it off. And the media attention really came. So suddenly every time there was something about children and mothers, so whether it be flexible work impacting mothers, suddenly I was getting called from the media as well. Well, what about fathers? And I said, well, yeah, it's actually a little bit worse for fathers. So here in Australia, our Workplace Gender Equality Agency reports that despite 70% of Australian workplaces now having a formal policy for flexible working, less than 2% have set targets for men's engagement in that flexible working. So that's why I say to them, we keep the lazy dad trope needs to go in the rubbish bin of history, because until we acknowledge the significant barriers that we face, such as the ballet hall, the lesson, we may be included a lot of times, but there's a big difference between being included and feeling welcomed, where we inhabit those spaces, whether it be volunteering at the school canteen. And, there's been some pretty awkward situations. It's like, well, why are you here? Oh, my daughter's, yeah, but don't you work? And all of the silly questions that come with it. And that's why I say, when there's a thing called incredulity. Sorry for my pronunciation there, where a woman might be mistaken, a doctor mistaken as a nurse, or a CEO mistaken as a secretary. Well, it happens to men as well, especially in caregiving. Are you babysitting? Are good to see a dad out with his daughter for once? Well, it's 100 times. So it's right around the same with the mansplaining. Well, mate, I hate to tell you how much mumsplaining I've had done to me. And a lot of people say, well, that's not as bad. I say, well, it's the same opposite side
Yeah.
of the same coin. So it's at the beginning of the shaming and guilt of mothers who don't carry the caring load and the doubt and denigration of dads who do. You can't separate both of them. So as much as we have such a loud chorus of voices at the moment saying women, when given the opportunity, can do anything men can do, we hardly have a whisper of people saying, apart from birth and breastfeeding, men can do anything women can do when given the opportunity. And that's what it needs to take, because workplaces need to go, I've got a dad and a mum. I've got to provide them both with the same opportunity, and any negative aspects that their caring may have on a women's thing also apply to a man. So whereas the male as the ideal worker has always been perpetrated on the misnomer that, well, men don't have caring responsibilities, so they can be more focused, more present, and more engaged in the workplace. And we men just keep sort of sitting there going, oh, okay, luckily my wife's got that flexible working. Her workplace is in the 70% that does have the formal policy. Mine's in the 98% that doesn't. That's not a gendered choice there. That's a failure of policy.
Yeah. So many things come to mind there, but one of the first was the scene in the Barbie movie from last summer where the Ryan Gosling character as Ken, discovers this idea of patriarchy. And, because the whole movie turns the world on its own. And he goes in to talk to this doctor who's a woman, as you talked about, gender incredulity. And he says, well, I'm here. Who's the doctor? He's like, I'm a doctor. Like, you can't be a doctor. I'm going to be a doctor. I'm a man. And like, you're not a doctor. Like, and he steps in and he's so good at it because he shows the absurdity of it. But, listening to what you're saying here about, the 70%, the 98%, and, we can create companies can create all of these policies. They can create amazing policies and say, everything's going to be equal. You're going to have, if there's a parental leave, 20 weeks for the man, 20 weeks for the woman, no problem. Everybody has, we talk a lot at the company dads about, care shifts and, care days of ways to sort of be open and honest about, the way we're going to work and live. And those are, of course, policy decisions. But the problem is it's pretty easy. Well, it's not easy, but it's easy enough to sort of mandate an equal allocation of days or times for men and women around parenting or caregiving. What's more difficult, though, is to train those, or what companies have not invested as much into, is to train those managers to speak differently. Because when the manager says, well, when I was doing this, I missed so much in my kid's life, you're taking the time off, like, but the career is, I know you've done a lot of speaking, a lot of talking to companies. When you talk to companies in Australia and you explain to them that it's not just setting up an equal policy, but it's training those managers so they are supportive of men and women, so that men and women feel like they can take that time and not be penalized for it. What's your experience been like with some of these Australian companies and having these discussions with them?
Well, I usually find the C-suite are great. They're committed. They're genuine and authentic in their desire to help men be more present, involved, and engaged in their children's life. The line managers, not so much, and then trying to get through to the workforce that you've got one shot at this. Like, there's no, I can do my child's early years again at a later stage. So grab it now. Your workplace, the fact that I'm here, because a lot of places, parental leave for dads is a bit like Fight Club. We've got it. It's on paper, but don't, like, please,
don't mention
just,
Fight Club.
yeah, skulk off. And when you get back, the minute you get back, Don't talk about it, and
Yeah.
straight back to your 40-hour week stretch projects and all the rest of it. So I say to dads, I'd say to these organizations, you've got your policy. Yep. What's the uptake? Oh, somewhere between 6 and 14%. Really? And why do you think the policy is not working? What do you mean?
Mm.
Well, is there any other initiative or policy or strategy that you would put in place thinking that great 100% acceptance would be good, will be profitable, we'll call it a success, and it's at between 6 and 14%, and you're going, well, our job's done, we've provided it. So
Yeah.
what do you think that says about your culture? What do you mean? Well, do you stamp out, are you worried about sexist, misogynistic, racial, less diversity, inclusion? Yep. Well, what about dads being joked about? How was your holiday? How did
Oh
you
yeah.
enjoy your break? Or when Tom gets back, we've got him going here rather than that's what I always say, Paul, puppies and kittens aren't just for Christmas and dads aren't just for parental leave. Both, once you've got them, ongoing, long term, ever evolving
Mm-hmm.
needs. And that, so rather than, right, you're off for your 6 weeks, great, we'll pat ourselves on the back. We're such a progressive, supportive company. But when you get back, what do you mean flexible? What do you mean being able to work 4 days a week? What do you mean being able to transition, come back a couple of days a week,
Yeah.
maybe extend it to 4 days or 3 days? All of these things that are provided to women to facilitate their caregiving haven't supported women. They've actually locked them into that role and limited their progression. Whereas if we actually incentivize the changes we want to do and then say to the rest of the workforce, don't be scared. It's sort of like when your partner might to you say, I've got this great idea. I'm going to go on a golf weekend with the boys and you don't mind, do you? And they go, fine. Fine. What do you mean? No, it's fine. No, do you mind if I go? You do what you want. It's up to you. And it's ruined for you. So, you know what?
100%. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm probably not going to go. I don't really want to do it and that's what a lot of the shared parenting leave is like in these organizations. And that's why I say to them, without sounding like an advert, if you get someone like me in and say to them, I can tell you why you're worried about doing it. You don't feel you're as capable, as competent as your wife at it. The thought of being home alone with your child and something going wrong is a little bit terrifying and scared, but it's like being promoted into the new role. A lot more responsibilities. You have that imposter syndrome. You're not sure if you can do it. Well, I'm here to tell you if I can do it, anyone can do it because you couldn't have got a more consciously and conspicuously incompetent parent than me in the beginning. But the good news is you don't become a parent the day your children are born. You
Right.
only begin becoming a parent. No more than a student becomes a scholar when they walk through the school gates. You learn it and it changes that much. What worked last week? I'll just put the crook in there about sleep. That stops working. Like
Right.
it's like a never-ending cryptic crossword puzzle. And it's now, how can I do it? But they don't break. They're pretty resilient.
Yeah, I joke with my oldest daughter who's 14 and a half, yeah, that I can't believe that when she was born, she fit in my arm. Like her head would be on my hand and she would extend no further than the bend of my elbow. And of course now she's a young woman. She's 5 foot, 6 inches tall. She's as tall as my wife. When I listen to this, I find this fascinating because I mean, one of the big things that the company does, very much like we spend a lot of time doing workplace education, either in person, keynote speeches, or we're developing a whole course. And I believe, that change happens at companies, that companies have a profit motive. And if we can show those companies that having equal policies for men and women is actually good for your entire workforce, it's good for dads, they're better humans. But it's also, if you really believe in gender equity in the workforce, then a woman should have every right to be promoted to the C-suite as the man. But if you don't have these equal policies, it's not going to happen. You're going to be in a shoebox. But I think like the best companies out there, they measure everything. and they ask questions, 360 questions. They figure it out. But I heard the story recently from Squarespace, which is a big tech company here in the U.S. They're probably global, but they had this policy of equal leave for parents, and it's generous by United States standards. It was sort of, I think it was 20, 24 weeks for both men and women. And then they did research, and they realized that women were generally taking their full allotment, whatever it was, 20, 24 weeks, but men were only taking about half of it. And so the conclusion, in asking that one question, that one data point, the conclusion was, well, we should reduce parental leave for men. They're not taking it. And you know where I'm going with this. My initial reaction was, no, you are asking the wrong question. The question is, why aren't they taking it? What is going wrong in management that they're not feel that they are allowed to do? Is it feel that they're going to be penalized to do this? When you've been in situations like that with companies in Australia, how have you helped those leaders see some clarity around their policies and make those small changes today that are going to have big impacts for the company, but also for the community, and of course for those moms and dads going forward?
One of the biggest ones, Paul, is showing them the retention rates and the engagement at work. And that's why I say, show me a man struggling at home, whether it be through the relationship or with his child or going through a separation, I will show you one of the least productive, engaged employees you'll ever have. Show me a man who sits there and goes, how good is this? I get to be a sports coach for my kids' sports team because I'm supported. I get to do drop-off. I get to do this. Another firm may headhunt him. They can't offer him all of that stuff now. He doesn't. Employees don't leave jobs. They leave managers and line managers. So that's why I say to them, but you've also got to go, you've got an environmental and social governance aspect that you put through. You want to talk about doing no harm to the environment? What about doing no harm to the families that work for you, the children's outcomes, all of those things? Like, you want to sit there and go, great, we've offset our carbon output by planting 400 trees. Meanwhile, we're insisting that our men are there, the fathers are there at this time and that time. And, I think we need to put a little bit more value on the impact that you have, because for too long, workplaces have not only shaped, but even dictated family roles and dynamics going forward. And those early years, and when you support them and go, here's actually some resources for you as a first-time nervous dad to help you settle into it, to be comfortable. Here's some reading or some experts that we think are fantastic. Here's our dad's group that we have. But we also need to be careful that it's not just a dad's group, that it's a parents group, so that men can get in and share their experience and promote it. Go, how good is this? Instead of going to Tom, are you going to take time off when your kid's born? It's like, Tom, how much time are you going to take? You've got 14 weeks. Now, we're expecting you to take the 14 weeks, and what we can do along the way, we'll have this point of contact, that point of contact. And when you come back, the question we do need to ask, do you want to come back to full-time hands-on role, or do you want to come back a couple of days a week? Do you want to be contacted, and just do everything rather than asking the questions with a negative connotation? Just the assumption should be, of course you're going to take it all. Why wouldn't you? It's the most wonderful, stressful, magical, messy moments that you'll ever endure in your life, and you'll come back a better person, both professionally and personally, through doing it. And we're expecting to see some serious growth and opportunities for you as a result of it.
Michael Ray, thanks for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast. Last question for you. Charlie is 12. When you think about, this age now and all the stuff that you're doing with her, did you ever imagine it when she was 2? How is this, tell me, leave us with a great story of you and Charlie and things that you still like to do. I'm going to guess, seeing you on video here, she's not braiding your hair. So
she's causing it to leave. Paul, one of the most impactful moments was when I was going through the treatment when I was young. I was struggling with the treatment, and I remember saying to the nurse, I just don't know if I can do this. Everything was becoming overwhelming, and this nurse actually said to me, look, one day you'll be at Disneyland with this kid and you'll look back and this will be nothing but a speed bump. You've got to play the long game and look to the future. Well, as it happened, Disney reached out and I did a story for Disney, and the story went so well, I did another couple, and they offered me tickets to Disneyland. And they said, any Disneyland you want. So off we went to Hong Kong. And Paul, when we got to the gates of Disneyland, I'm going to cry again now, I lost it completely. I had Chinese people coming, oh, you lost your door, you lost it. No, I'm just happy. Like, I just completely lost it. And I think that was the first time. She was 6 then. I think that was the first time where I actually exhaled and thought, I'm there, Dad. The bad stuff is gone. We can put that away. And, now we go surfing together. She holds a couple of Australian powerlifting records. We play AFL football here, which is pretty rough. It's like NFL, but without the pads. She wins the coaches award. And everyone keeps saying to me, thankfully she doesn't look like you, but gee, she's got your personality. And it's just, it's just magical, Paul. Life is the best at the moment.
It's a wonderful story. I want to tie it back to Disney because that reminds me, a great story. Last week, I was in Disney World in Orlando, my wife and our 3 daughters. And on the last day, my wife, one of the restaurants asked the server, what's it like to work here? And she was effusive. And what she was talking about wasn't how much she got paid. It wasn't her colleagues. It wasn't, it wasn't us. It wasn't the guest, who may or may not leave a decent tip. She was effusive about the care and parenting plan that Disney had. And her husband also worked for Disney, and they were able to maneuver their schedule so he could drop their daughter off. She could pick them up. But what she kept talking about was they had childcare for $10 a day. The company subsidized the rest of it. She knew that her daughter was in a safe place to grow and thrive. And when it came to vacations, they had something. And it really brings me back to what you were saying, that, people don't leave companies because they get a 3% pay increase someplace else. If you get a 100% pay increase, everyone's going to leave. They leave because of, managers. And so I already asked you for one last thought, but I'm going to ask you again. When you think of those, managers in Australia who might reach out to you, what is the takeaway that you can give them so that they're going to create that, Disney-like work environment where people will never leave, and they won't leave because it's the culture. It's not the 3, 5, 7% raise each year.
Yeah, it's showing that the most important thing in the world to you, your family, is also important to them. They don't want to become a friction on your family when they show your family's important. If something catastrophic happened, yep, no worries, pack, go, get to the hospital, do whatever. It shouldn't have to come to a catastrophe, Paul. It should be constant. How can we help you? How can we work together? It can't be all for us and none for you. If you want to engender that genuine appreciation and connection for the company, include their family. Realize that your policies not only impact your workforce, they impact their families. And that's the sort of company that people want to work for. And that's what a company should be aiming for, rather than stock appreciation and return for shareholders. It's look at the environment, the community that we've built for our family. Our workers, they're involved in the community, they're connected with their family, they're happy, and we're more productive because of it.
Michael Wright, thank you again for being my guest today on the Company of Dads podcast.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you for listening to the Company of Dads podcast. I also want to thank the people who make this podcast and everything else that we do with the Company of Dads possible. Helder Mira, who is our audio producer. Lindsay Decker, who handles all of our social media. Terry Brennan, who's helping us with the newsletter and audience acquisition. Emily Servin, who is our web maestro. And of course, Evan Roosevelt, who is working side by side with me in many of the things that we do here at the Company of Dads. It's a great team, and we're just trying to bring you the best in fatherhood. Remember, the one-stop shop for everything is our newsletter, The Dad. Sign up at thecompanyofdads.com/thedad. Thank you again for listening.